Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron and I'm back again with another exciting Alpha Strike Battlytics Lance on Lance review. So we are still in round 2 of our tournament and we're still looking at that same bracket. Tonight we're going to look at the Kanagawa Crushers, a fan favorite, against Thunder Rolls. So Thunder Rolls is some tough competition. It's seeded very well in the initial sort of arrangement of the tournament. But the Kanagawa Crushers, you know, they cut their teeth against the Crimson Stalkers. They eked out a victory in round 1 by just a single win. If you guys remember, that one was a dead heat, dead even all the way to the finish. So very, very excited to see how these two teams match up. So guys, stick around. It's coming right up. All right, guys, let's take a look at the fan favorite, Kanagawa Crushers against Thunder Rolls. So this is a classic Draconis Combine against FedSun's matchup. The Crushers managing to win a tiebreaker in round 1 against the Crimson Stalkers. That was a great one. They split it 1250 to 1250, and the Crushers won on that tiebreaker. So is that going to be enough to take on their House Davian foes here? Let's find out. So I should point out Thunder Rolls, they seeded 7th in the overall tournament. So not bad. It was enough to get them a round 1 bye. And the Crushers, so they seeded 23rd. So far round 1 upset here, and they are looking to face the 7th seed here. So let's see what happens in this exciting matchup. So the Crushers, again, nothing changed. Once you lock in your lance, your rolls, your skills, it's set. This is a 149-point lance, a Black Knight at skill 3, a Grasshopper at skill 3, Catapult K2, which I love the spec, skill 4, and then a Mongoose in a strike roll at skill 3. Love the Mongoose. I think it's such a cool design. Can't wait for the new model in Wave 2. I think I said that the last time. So anyway, so what do I think about these guys? Well, I think this is a very solid lance. You can look at the point value distribution. The Grasshopper is a little bit high. You know, maybe one thing I would do here is run the Grasshopper at a skill 4. We saw that be very effective in the last review that we did. You know, otherwise, though, I mean, I think this is a pretty solid lance. That Mongoose a little bit expensive. I think some of these smaller, faster mechs, that TMM3, right, the Jenners, things like that, they can get very, very pricey. And in fact, speaking of Jenners, I think a JR7F might be priced a little bit less than this, but I would have to go back and look. I definitely know it has another pip of armor and another pip of structure, too. It's a little slower from a move perspective, but still gets that TMM3. Anyway, great lance. Let's take a look at Thunder Rolls. I always want to call this lance Rolling Thunder, which then makes me think of Tropic Thunder. But this lance, Thunder Rolls, this thing is designed to just be a jerk on the tabletop. This is like, you know, if there was such a thing as like a, you know, an Alpha Strike Lance on Lance tournament, outside of Battlytics, this would be something that, you know, I would consider bringing. You know, it's got those dual Warhammers, and these are the 6Ds. These things are brutal. So, you know, traditionally you think of the Warhammer 6R, it's got like 5 pips of armor, 6 structure, hate it. This thing's got 7 pips of armor. It strips off all of the stupid missiles and machine guns, and, you know, you get heat sinks and armor, I believe, in this particular variant. They're not cheap. At a veteran skill level, skill 3, they're 43 points a pop. Both of these Warhammers in a direct fire roll. It's where you'd want them. The next mech here is a Crab. This is one of Tom's favorites. I really do like this mech in Alpha Strike. I think having it at a skill 4 is exactly what you should do, because you're going to be running this thing in. You're going to be getting it in medium and then short. You're going to want to overheat with it. It's got solid armor. It's a 50-ton mech, but it moves well too. You know, that move 5 gives it that TMM of 2. It's not like life and death, but again, it's got 5 pips of armor, 4 structure. It's basically on par with the Phoenix Hawk 1K, you know, but it has an overheat value, which I think is very, very valuable. Being able to punch 4 at short range could be, you know, could be devastating. And then that TBT-5N, this is a great mech. So 2s across the board. It's got overheat 1. It's got a TMM of 2. 4 armor and 4 structure is not great. I mean, I'd rather have it be like that crab, a 5-4. But considering it's got that long range damage, you can keep it in the back and see what you can do. It's also in a direct fire role here. 150 points on the lance, just some candid reflection here. A lot of things in direct fire. So that crab is going to be like out front and it's going to get blasted. It's going to get blasted hard. But it is the cheapest out of all of the mechs in the lance. It's going to be a fire magnet. Maybe that'll work, maybe it won't. You know, I almost wonder, you know, would you drop one of the Warhammers for something else? You know, a Marauder or something like that. Something else you can put in a Vanguard role and, you know, kind of send up the gut along with that crab. We'll see how it pans out. As far as the key force markers go for this, you know, really solid armor. The average weighted damage, that's the 3 bullets, the second point there, is at 2.8. So it's a little bit lower, I think, than what we've seen. We see a lot of them at 3. But again, you know, you've got some good skill pilots on here, so we'll see how that pans out. You know, the thing is, those Warhammers don't have overheat. We've seen a lot of like Black Knights and Riflemen and things that have overheat too, which can really drive that weighted damage up because you can just punch so hard with them. But, you know, we'll see. Again, you know, good armor, good structure, decent speed. No real complaints there. I mean, 2 5s, 2 4s, I think that's a really solid heavy lance. So let's dive in and see what happens. Here we are again. So these guys doing really well. So if you look at the extreme and the long range, these guys are, you know, exceeding expectations. So they're punching hard, they're punching fast, they're getting that early damage out there. Medium and short range, you know, to be expected. Medium is always typically higher than you know, what you're rated at. Short is a little bit low, but, you know, that could be just a product of the rolls. Now, looking at battle metrics, that raises an eyebrow or two. I mean, they're only dealing basically 1/3 of the damage. They're taking 2/3 of the damage in this game. Now, it's not a foregone conclusion that means they're going to lose. I mean, it depends on how the damage is spread around, so we'll have to dive in and see. As far as survivability goes, the lance in its entirety surviving, you know, basically 1 in 5 games. So we'll see how it pans out. But what I do see here is these guys are hitting hard. I mean, they're still doing 21.6 points of damage over the course of the game. They are taking 36.2. You know, what's really interesting, though, is the criticals. They're dealing 4.8 criticals. They're taking 9.1. So, you know, maybe that means that it is, in fact, getting spread around, and that damage, you know, because of the way the rolls are set up. You know, again, the Thunder Rolls has a lot of direct fire mechs. They're going to be sitting back, hitting targets of opportunity. So we'll see. Efficiency analysis. So overall average efficiency, 71.3%. It's like a B, B+. The Grasshopper doing well. Again, Grasshoppers just seem to be fantastic mechs, you know, in Alpha Strike. That Catapult hitting lance average, but still below 100%. Black Knight in the same boat. And the Mongoose doing what the Mongoose does. Just hovering in there. What is that, 20%, 27%? So, you know, but what do you expect? Again, you're like staring down the barrel of like 4 or 5 PPCs or whatever. This thing's not going to last very long. Let's take a look at the Black Knight first. So this was one that performed, I think, very well in the last matchup. This one, it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's running up the middle. It's taking a whole bunch of damage, 21.7%. I mean, you can see it gets primed up, and the damage. Look at the scaling on the y-axis, guys. I mean, on average, turn 4, turn 5. Turn 5, it's taking 6 points of damage. So basically, turn 4 on average, you know, you're taking half your armor. By turn 5, you're basically halfway through your internal structure. In a normal game, you're in forced withdrawal. By turn 6, turn 7, you're basically dead. There's that major inflection point on the armor analysis. You can see it dips. The armor basically dips, and you're in structure by turn 4, turn 5. So overall, how's this thing doing? From a movement perspective, it is moving straight in and then, meeting its demise. It does well in terms of efficiency in those early turns, but then it just tapers off because it's dead almost 100% of the time in turn 8. It's only surviving 0.1% of games of the 2,500 simulations. So overall, this thing, I mean, if its job is to run in and get shot and draw fire, it is doing that. It's building up its heat. It's doing as much damage as it can do, but basically it's taking almost, 2.5 times the damage that it's dealing. So, all right, moving on. Grasshopper. Love this mech. 120.5% efficiency. Strong performer. It gets in early by turn 3. It's dealing damage. Its average range is about medium, 6.2 inches. It's hitting across the spectrum, but then turn 6, turn 7, it gets primed up. It's only surviving 7.7% of the time. So if you look at that armor analysis and you look at the survivability curve, what's interesting is it's doing very well until about turn 6, and that means early in the game, it's left largely alone, and it's able to churn out 17.7% of the overall damage, which I think, guys, is, 9 and 7, it's almost 50% of the entire lance output. So there's that. It's taking a little bit more damage than that Black Knight, but not by much. And you can see, again, 7.7% survivability. It's running in, it's doing what it can, but just not able to compete here. All right, so this catapult. So this thing has some opportunities. It's largely left alone until about turn 7, but for some reason only averaging 1 point of damage. And again, skill 4, it's going to hurt your output. I think for a mech like this, where you have a direct fire roll, you want this thing skill 3 at a minimum. It's doing less than 1 point of damage on average per turn, so it has the opportunity, but it can't cash in. It's hanging in the back. You can see in the middle there, it's kind of skittering around, trying to keep things at range, taking evasive action. The average range to target is 20.3 inches. So what jumps out at me about the 20.3 inch average range is this thing is, again, this sort of ties in, is consistent with the overall damage output. It's never getting to medium range, and that's because, in that direct fire roll, it's really focused on self-preservation. It's focused on staying downrange. It's not going to put itself in a tremendous amount of threat if it can do damage, and it sees an uptick from long range 2 to medium range 3. Doesn't really see the need to close any closer than that. So it's interesting with this particular mech, with this particular skill, with this particular configuration. Like a Catapult C1, or, whatever that one is with the LRMs, where I think it does 3 at long. Actually, I think that does 2 at long too, but let's talk about like an Archer or something like that where it has 3 at long. I think those types of mechs are better suited for that direct fire roll. And again, we talked about the skill. Anyway, efficiency on this mech wasn't terrible, 70.5%. It does a pretty good job of surviving. I mean, obviously in that direct fire roll, it's keeping range, so it's surviving 72.8% of the time. But it's also not doing a ton to contribute to the fight either, and that's a 65-ton mech. It's taking up about 21% of the overall Lance PV. So, little to be desired there. Now the Mongoose. These Mongoose, they struggle. So this guy only did 2.9%, and you can see this is the first thing to go. It comes into range. It starts taking damage immediately on turn 2, and by turn 3, it's basically dead. It survives none of the games. In fact, it survives none of the games past turn 4. You can see it just bottoms out there. which is unfortunate. And it starts to do a little bit of damage. It tries, but it just can't compete. 5 total pips. Two shots from the Warhammers at medium range, things toast. And it's closing fast. I mean, you can see that green line. You can see how much space there is between the nodes. It's sprinting on turn 1, turn 2, and turn 3. It's just a standard move, and it's already at basically point blank range. And it's very much outpaced everything else in the lance. So is what it is. Efficiency 27.1%. That's like an F minus. It's just tough for these little mechs. To compete in this particular arena. Lots of great conversation in the comments section and on Discord about, light mechs and their role. But the reality is on the tabletop, having a harassing role, having these like reconnaissance-based mechs that are just kind of meant to get in, spy on some things. They have enough armor and weapons to, to fend off some enemies, and they get back to base. They're not really meant for this straight up combat. And, whether there's terrain on the board or not, and whether you can pop these things out of cover and shoot something in the back, the reality is as soon as you're out of cover, you're dead. So whether it's turn 3 or turn 9, this thing's really not contributing and getting that, sort of return on that point cost, which was in the 30s, so not cheap. Anyway, let's take a look at Thunder rolls. We'll see their lance. We'll see the overall metrics and some of their mechs and how they did. And then we'll get into the final comparison. All right, so, man, 2/3, guys. 2/3 of the damage basically dealt by this particular force, 62.6%. That's a lot. In terms of the actual damage, look how much more they're doing at long range than rated. So their actual damage almost 10% more than their rated. Medium also doing, what medium does, right? 50% to about 35%. Short range, barely doing damage at short range comparatively, about half of what's expected. And that's probably because they're doing much more at long and medium. But just look at those battle metrics. Again, 62.6%. They are outperforming the Krushers every single turn. Turn 4 gets kind of close, but that's about it. When you look at the survivability of this lance, there is one particular mech that gets absolutely blown to shreds. I'll let you guess which one that is. The rest of them, though, doing very well. The overall lance survivability, 64.3%. Average range is medium, 11.3 inches. They're doing about 1.5x in terms of damage, dealt taken there. 36.2 damage dealt, 21.6 taken, and they're almost doubling the number of criticals delivered versus taken. So the overall lance efficiency, guys, the average lance efficiency is 120.8%. I think that's the highest in the tournament so far. So that's pretty darn good in terms of efficiency. And that's specific to this matchup. But still very good. The Warhammers just blowing the doors off the charts here. The one Warhammer exceeding 150%. That crab, well, even though it looks low, it's still almost at 100%. I think it's probably in the 80s, 85% there. And the Trebuchet over 100% as well. So very high performing lance here. Let's take a look at each of the individual mechs. Now these Warhammers, I expect these guys to probably perform similarly. We'll see. One of them is probably taking more fire than the other. But, in terms of damage output, let's take a look. So these things are really just monstrous. So this one is at, 19.6%. The other Warhammer at 22.1% in terms of damage dealt. This one at 12.3%, the other Warhammer at 3.5%. So sort of what I had expected. So this one looks like it's the one taking all the fire, but really that comes on slowly and doesn't peak until turn 6, and that's only 2 points, right? So check out the Y scaling. Damage dealt, it's a nice belly of a curve there. It's on average doing about 2 points in the meat of the game. Survivability is great at 74.6%. It's really not seeing critical hits until late game, like turn 9. And we talked about the efficiency, 136.5%. In terms of movement profile, I mean, this thing is getting in. So the Warhammer, deployed centrally, again, with the other Warhammer, and also the Trebuchet, the crab out there on the left flank. That thing is, you can see the sprints on the crab. That's the bottom white line there. Moving very aggressively to get in, drawing the fire, allowing those Warhammers to get into medium range, where they can do that 3 points of damage. And with a skill 3 pilot, they're hitting hard, they're hitting frequently, they're getting good damage on the board. The other Warhammer, I mean, this thing is just barely touched. So much armor, good damage, and it's in a good roll. I mean, it's at 12.9. It's interesting. Average range is actually long, and it's still doing 22.1% of the overall damage, surviving 95.2% of the time. That's really, really high. On average, doesn't see any critical hits. I mean, you're barely tapping into the armor, let alone the internal structure, and the efficiency analysis pegs this one at 153.9%. So excellent efficiency on this mech. It's doing 12.8 damage per game on average. I mean, think about it. That's a lot in Alpha Strike. 2 points is all it's taking, barely taking any criticals, and it's delivering about 3 criticals a game. So if you leave these things alone or not, I mean, it seems like, at least in this matchup, these Warhammers, really well costed, really high performers, sort of in that grasshopper category of mech. So the crab, here he is. Is the crab doing what the crab does? Yes. The crab is moving his little crab legs as fast as he can, and he gets lit up. So turn 2, turn 3, and actually really the damage doesn't come on until turn 3. I'm wondering, what are they shooting on turn 2? Nothing. So it's interesting. So they really don't start dealing damage until turn 3, the Kanagawa Crushers. So this crab getting in, it takes a lot of damage in turn 4 and 5, but that buys the time that the Lance needs. It's still, at, what is that, 8.3% of the overall damage. It's not fantastic. Again, 12.5 is that sort of median mark. It's taking 15.7. It's barely surviving 7.9% of the time. But its efficiency is 85.2%. It's a B+ student there. It's not bad. And again, it's not about the individual mech, it's about the Lance, right? And I think this crab is doing exactly what the sort of the Lance commander of Thunder Rolls wanted, right? Getting in, drawing fire, doing what it can, overheating if it can. It's what it does. Not much to say more about that. Now this Trebuchet, I was very interested to see how this thing performed. I love these types of mechs that have a very consistent damage profile. They're not too costly. They're quick. You can maneuver them. You can get them into range. You can hit the targets you want to hit. This thing did very, very well. 12.6% of the overall damage. So again, that's about what you want. But it was only 11.7% of the overall PV pool of all of the mechs on the table. So doing more, costing less, that's what you want. That's how you drive that efficiency score above 100%. In terms of damage, so that dotted white line on the battle metrics in the top left there, that's the average. That's the average damage dealt and taken, right? Because those things are corollaries by turn for all of the forces. So what you see here, it's interesting. The Trebuchet is basically following the expected curve. It does a little bit better early game, a little bit better late game. It underperforms a little bit in the middle, probably because it only maxes out at 2 damage, 3 with the overheat. But I'm happy with this mech. If I could have a Lance of mechs that perform just like this, I would be very happy. It's consistent. It's reliable. If you look at the movement profile, it's sort of hitting and fading, hitting and fading, hitting. So it's doing well. Average range is 15.9 inches, so it is hanging out at long range. And why not? It's doing about 2 times the amount of damage that it's receiving. And then crit-wise, it's landing crits, and it's not taking them. And again, this is what you want. So overall efficiency on this mech, 107.5, pretty good. So right now, Thunder Rolls looking very good, but the Kanagawa Crushers, again, tough, gritty, and we all know it's a game of BattleTech, anything goes. So guys, let's look at the final numbers and see how it shakes out. Well, I guess I saw this one coming. When one lance, is doing 2/3 of the damage on the table, it's hard. And again, that's average damage. We're talking 2,500 games. The Kanagawa Crushers were only able to win 4.5% of those games. Thunder Rolls just dominating with 95.5% in the win column there. That's pretty impressive. So what does it come down to, guys? Well, you've got a lance that's highly efficient. They're staying at range. They're hitting harder. They're getting more kills on average per game, just slightly though. Hit percentage is up almost 8% higher. But the big thing was survivability. So those Kanagawa Crushers, again, only dealing about 1/3 of the overall damage. Survivability for Thunder Rolls was 64.3%. Meanwhile, the Krushers were at 20.1%, and you can see it on the plot there. There's that initial drop, and again, the Thunder Rolls is the darker gray line there. You can see the initial drop where that crab gets blown up, and then after that, it's just a really hard time for the Krushers to dig back out. They sink so much time and energy into that crab. And meanwhile, those Warhammers are just running free, blasting things to smithereens. And I think that is sort of the big sort of turning point when you get to turn 4, turn 5. There's just not a lot left on the table for the Krushers to sort of dig out of. Overall efficiency, the Thunder Roll is just much more efficient, 120%. It's going to be interesting to watch these guys in the next round. So we know the Ion Raiders won. They're tough, they're gritty, and now we've got Thunder Rolls facing off against them. So we're going to do a deep dive on that. You're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be interesting to see how these two forces stack up. I mean, was it a fluke? Sometimes Alpha Strike is a game of, rock, paper, scissors. And so maybe this was just a really ideal matchup, but something tells me those dual Warhammers, that crab, the Trebuchet, I think it's a really well-designed lance. So we'll see how this one does in the overall tournament. So, guys, that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive. And, of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.